Well, this is how I get some of my lessons. I'm just stupid enough that I have to be taught the crazy way. Well, here is one of them. But lobelia is so perfect, it's so wonderful. You know, a child can get bit by a mad dog. You can see that they get 15 drops of tincture lobelia every 15 minutes. A little bit more if they can take it without nausea. And there'll be no infection. There'll be no problems. We have seen so many things happen like this. We have seen people who want to get to an area and they have to be vaccinated. And they don't want a vaccination. So we start them off with tincture of lobelia. And they take it regularly. And they're forced into taking the vaccination, but nothing happens.
Is this the little blue flower that grows in our garden?
No. Lobelia is under two different names. Now, this is in Lobelia inflata, and it grows about 3 to 3.5 feet high. That which we have in our garden is the border plant, and it only grows little short ones. And it's beautiful, but it doesn't have the potency. It won't do what your Lobelia inflata will do. This is an herb that we use for strep throat, we use for irritations in the bronchial area. We use it for so many things. And I am amazed that we haven't used more of it, but it works. Have you any questions on nerves and nervings?
Yes, Dr. Christopher, when you said the lobelia and vaccination, lobelia, does it counteract the bad effects that the vaccination may have on your lymphatic system and your whole body by congestion or whatever? Is that what it does, or did I misunderstand you?
It's an antispasmodic, and how it works, I don't know. I don't know. You see, with most of our herbs, we enhance the physical condition of a specific area that's in malfunction. We make it better. We feed it. Now, whether lobelia will do this or not, I don't know. All I know is we have used it so successfully for so long that it works. It's one of our favorites.
You said every 15 drops every 15 minutes. For how long?
Until there is no evidence that you're going to have problems. If you use too much lobelia, it will be an emetic, and it'll cause you to throw up. I just remember my wife told me to always tell this story about lobelia because she thought it was quite interesting. She had watched the procedure. I'd come off of a series of lectures. I guess it had been 20, 25 days lecturing continually, and I got home just as a break. But I was rather exhausted, and I was down in our family room sitting there. Our youngest son, Steve, said, "Dad, you look like you've been beat. Can I get you something?" And I said, "Oh, some vinegar and apple cider vinegar and honey always gives me a build-up. Why don't you fix some for me?" "Okay, Dad, I will." So he heads upstairs, and he knows that I use a tablespoon of honey and a tablespoon of vinegar and mix it up in distilled water. And so he brought it down, and he said, he had a great big tall glass, and he said, "I know you're not stingy with your formulas, so I gave you 4 tablespoons of lobelia and 4 of apple cider vinegar and 4 tablespoons of honey, and stirred it up." I says, "Well, fine, that's good of you." And I took a taste of it, and I says, "Yeah, where did you get that vinegar?" Well, he says right up there, he says it's apple cider vinegar on it. I says, "Okay," and I put her down. I sat there for a moment or two, and I knew that I had to change quarters, and I tried to figure how many steps to the sanitary unit downstairs, And then I knew I couldn't make it. And I stood up and I let go. And I kept letting go. And I'm glad it was a tiled floor. And my wife stood over in the corner laughing and laughing. And finally, after it all run down and I got the mop and did some mopping up, she said, I said, I was over there dying and you were laughing at me. And she said, well, who could help but laugh because you were so weak and worn out. And then anybody that's got the strength that can throw it clear across the room. She said, that lobelia is great stuff. She says, I've heard that a few drops might kill a person, but you can tell people that you had 4 tablespoons. The reason we found it out, I checked out the bottle, and I did something that I wouldn't have allowed any place else. I had just found out that my tincture of lobelia, that was lobelia and lobelia seed, which makes it much stronger by far than just the lobelia alone. It was 14 days when I'd flown in, and it was just time to strain off. And there was nothing handy there but an apple cider vinegar bottle. It was empty. So I filled it in the apple cider vinegar bottle. Now, anybody that would have done a stunt like that without putting a different label on, or without scratching it, or something, I would have either fired them or spanked them. Well, I did it. And so I had put the tincture of lobelia and lobelia seed in the bottle, and it was the apple cider vinegar bottle. And my boy thought it was apple cider vinegar, so he gave me 4 running over tablespoons of it, and 4 tablespoons of honey. And I took it all in one drink.
Dr. Christopher, can you comment on the fact that the FDA considers lobelia a poison, and they actually have antidotes that you're supposed to take for lobelia poisoning, which appear to me to be worse than
the lobelia itself.
Than the lobelia would be itself. And how this whole thing got started as to considering lobelia poison.
Lobelia is one of the most innocent herbs we have. It is the most powerful herb, and it's as innocent as water. And when used properly, there is no excuse for a person not using it. I will say this, that use an additional amount, it acts as an emetic and you will throw up. And if you throw up, it's because you needed to in the first place. And get rid of it. But this whole thing goes back to Dr. Thompson of the Thompsonian routine, the Electra doctor. Dr. Thompson, as a small boy, about 4 or 5 years of age, was out, and he was an herbalist then, one of those Aquarians that was ahead of the time. And he would take certain herbs and he would taste them. And if they tasted okay, just taste a little, fine. If it didn't, he'd spit it out. And he was really wise. Well, he was the one that brought lobelia to America. And he, as a little chap, he gave it to one of his friends, a middle-aged man, and he said, hey, try this herb. And the fellow chomped it down and threw up. And well, this tickled Thompson. But there's a whole history on this wherein Thompson was arrested and thrown in a horrible jail because the man that had him arrested said that he had murdered a man by giving him lobelia, and could prove that he had murdered at least 50 more. This was ridiculous, of course. But to save him from dying from pneumonia in an open cell that had no windows and he had no coverings over his mat, they had a special trial for him. The doctor who had Thompson arrested could not give circumstantial evidence A or anything else. No exhibits. He just said, well, I know that it was done. But he did bring a man into court. He said, well, here, at least here's a man that used some of the lobelia. Thompson gave it to him. So the judge said, what did it do to you? He said it made me deathly sick. I said, that's all. And the man said, no, it isn't all. It made me deathly sick and I threw up, and he said, I've never had any trouble since. Thompson was exonerated. And if you want to look in the Americana Pharmacopoeia, you will find under the word lobelia, deadly poison. A man was tried for murder using this. It's right in there. I've got it in my library. This has carried all these years, and people still believe that it's a vicious thing to use, which is a half-truth, malfunction of the truth, really. So that's my story on lobelia. It's innocent, absolutely innocent. It has been used for even babies, yes.
We gave it to 2 young children who had asthma, and we warned the parents that it would probably make them throw up. We gave the tincture in water. In both cases, the children threw up, but they did not throw up the stomach contents. They threw up mucus from the lung area, just, enormous amounts, but nothing came from the stomach at all. And you talked about it being a thinking herb, and it seemed to go where it was needed and work in that area.
It is a thinking herb. Right while we're here, I'm going to tell you how to clear asthma in one operation. It's not too often I break into this, but there are enough serious people here now that I think this is the time. In Evanston, Wyoming, I'd opened up as a naturopathic physician, and nothing but MDs had been known there, and they didn't even know what a chiropractor was, so they didn't know what I was. And we nearly starved for a while, but then a doctor had given me quite a rough time, and it got worse and worse until 2 boys came in one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just got in off of house calls, and I thought someone was beating the side of the house in. I went down, and here these 2 young fellows had an old wheezing man between them, and he was just trying to get another breath of air. You know, it's an odd thing, folks, but breathing is one of the most important things we do, and yet we breathe automatically, in and out and in and out, but we don't do any deep breathing very often. And we don't even worry about breathing until we're about to die. And then we would give $1 million for one more breath if we could live just another minute longer. Well, this old gentleman was just about to the tail end. Now, may I say this, for asthma, for any type of disease, where I have had such great success over my years of practice, it has been because I've always taken that case on an emergency. When they figured a crisis had hit and they were either going to die or live. And this was when my success has been. This old man was at that point, yes.
I'd like to say that's true, because we've tried this routine on people that haven't been at that point, that they really have it badly, and we tell them what's going to happen, and we go into a bottle of it instead of 3 teaspoons.
That's it.
It doesn't work. I mean, they do expel for weeks after, but
It doesn't do the job.
Their body has to cooperate and be at that point.
This man, the boys told me when they woke me up and got me out, I told them to bring him in. And he was having a hard time just keeping alive. And the history was that he had had asthma for 26 years. For 20 years, he had never lain in a bed. They had a chair built special for him so he could sit up, so he wouldn't choke to death. And once or twice a week over that 20 years, a doctor would come and either give him oxygen tank or injections or something, or a pill or a tablet to keep him alive. Well, the doctor that had been taking care of him was on vacation, and the backup doctor couldn't be located. And so when the boys came in, they said, it says, naturopathic physicians, do you treat humans? And I said, yes, we do. Okay, well, could you help our pap? And so that's how we got started. They didn't even know, they just came to me on a gamble. Well, the first thing I gave this man, in between gasps, was a cup of peppermint tea. And he took the peppermint tea gulp by gulp as he could. And after he'd had the peppermint tea for 10 minutes, I gave him his first teaspoonful of tincture of lobelia, a full teaspoonful. We talked, and I watched the clock, and in another 10 minutes I gave him the second teaspoonful. I then gave him the third 10 minutes later. And may I say, in the hundreds of cases that I've had, and some of the cases that have been so close to death that we've been called in before they called a father, this has never taken more than 3 teaspoonsful of tincture of lobelia in any of these cases. So we sat back and talked. He had spent so much money now, the family had, on keeping him alive, that they had drawn all their savings and everything else out, and they were broke. But they wanted to keep Pap alive. So after a few more minutes, he started to throw up. And we had pans and buckets around, and he threw up over a cup of pus. And I mean, it was from green to black, yellows. It was the nastiest looking stuff. But it had come right out of those lungs and bronchi. And he threw up for, let's see, from 2 until 5, 3 hours. Now, if any of you are sensitive around the lower cavity, and you know you start throwing up, you're going to get black and blue. You're going to be so painful there that it'll be like someone had beat you with a baseball bat. He had no soreness, absolutely no soreness, and no marks or anything. And why? There's the key. We gave him the peppermint tea, and this is the stimulant of stimulants. This is a stimulant that offsets people's fear. We could have given him cayenne, and he possibly would have taken it down. But he took the peppermint tea and liked it. But he had thrown up. And so I said to the boys, okay, your dad is ready to take home. He's healed. Oh, they said, 26 years, he's healed? Shall we come back tomorrow? I said, no, that's a do-it-yourself kid. He's done. Well, they looked at me like I was pixelated. And they took Pa home. But when they took him home, he said, all right, boys, take me to a bed. This was 5 o'clock in the morning. And they said, well, Pa, you'll choke to death. You sat in this chair for 20 years. Take me to a bed. I'm still boss here. A little weazened old guy. I'm still boss here. Okay, Pap. They took him to a bed. And he slept from 5 o'clock in the morning through that day and that night and the next day. 5 o'clock in the morning, he was still asleep, and he slept through until afternoon, which is over 30 hours. He was oxygen starved, just famished. When he woke up, he did the first time he'd ever been able to do this in 26 years. He took a great big deep breath of air, and he didn't choke up. And he said, I'm healed. I'm healed. He went out the next day and got a job as a gardener, the first job he'd had in over 20 years. And he worked steady. And I saw these boys nearly 20 years later in Salt Lake. One of them came up to me to let me know that from Evanston they still remembered me, and Pap was still alive and still working as a gardener, and had not lost one day's work, and he'd never had in 20 years another attack of asthma, which he had suffered for 26 years.
a water when you're getting that tincture of lobelia, or just
No.
lobelia and they have your saliva take it out?
Plain lobelia. Mm-hmm.
Do you tell the patient that they're going to be throwing up like that?
Oh, yes.
Some people might not want to take it if they know they have to throw up in order to.
The people that we've got are sick enough, they'll do it.
I know a woman who the doctors say she has pus cells in her lungs, and she has this dry cough all the time. This dry cough. Do you think that particular routine would work for her? Or
Now, will that routine work or not? It depends. If she is to a climax where she's about to die, that's the ones. Each of my cases, and I've had many of them. One was my own niece, Ann Cummings. Her dad called, middle of the night. 14 years she had suffered with asthma. And they never asked for any help. Never. And I don't run before I'm called. But Jack called and said, your favorite niece is going to die by morning. If you want to see her, you better come tonight. And I said, okay, Jack, we'll be there. And last thought, before I hung up, he said, by the way, Ray, will you bring some herbs? 14 years. Will you bring some herbs? I said, yes. Packed my bag, and the wife and I went up there. This was in the middle of the night. And we used the same program of the 3 teaspoons of lobelia.
it has to be at that point that they're ready to die before it'll work?
It has for me, let's put it that way. Because when I've been called out, it's emergency in the middle of the night. And this is where I've had my success. Now, we have a formula for asthma, hay fever, and sinus that over a period of time will even take care of emphysema. But it's a long range. But when you want it right now, you wait for a climactic time. All right, so Anne, we sat there and watched her throw up and come through this. She had been for 14 years a weak child. She now has 2 beautiful children, and she's doing very fine and has never had any asthma attacks.
The same principle then at a climactic point would work on emphysema.
Absolutely.
Okay. With this, wasn't this kind of the antihistamine formula you were talking about that would work on emphysema? Or was that the...
Yes, it'll work also.
Okay, you wouldn't use more or less the lung formula, you'd use that.
Yes, it's well, a lung formula, and it's pretty close to the same.
Okay.
Yes.
What about cancer of the lungs?
Cancer of the lungs, you go to the incurables and follow that step by step. And this will do the job. Cancer of the lungs, yes.
How do you use this with strep throat?
With strep throat, it's an odd thing, but we have seen case after case where they have just taken a few drops of tincture lobelia in the mouth and hold it there and let it dribble down the throat. You see, strep throat, over a period of time, it has cleared the strep, just like smelling a chopped up onion. Just the essence from a chopped up onion will clear strep. But we do go a little bit deeper than this, because if there is strep, there is a drainage down the tubes. And if there's a drainage, where does it come from? The sinuses. So the sinuses are plugged. And so we go into another stimulant now. We go into horseradish. Horseradish. This is one of the greats of all times. You grate a root of horseradish in between tears and put the grating, unless you use a blender or something else, and put the gratings in with apple cider vinegar until you've got a slush, thick slush. 1/3 of a teaspoon, chewed thoroughly. 3 times a day, you chew a 1/3 of a teaspoon each time, 3 times a day. And by being chewed thoroughly, you can tell, because by the time you've chewed it thoroughly, you quit bawling, and you pull your scalp off the ceiling and put it back on. And this means that it's cutting those sinuses loose. You know, there are two types of people. There are nose breathers and mouth breathers. And the nose breather is excellent, but the mouth breather is generally one who has this sinus condition stopping it up. Well, you increase this third of a teaspoon each 3 days until you get up to a teaspoon of horseradish 3 times a day. And this will do the job. You can always tell when a bunch of young people come in off of a motorcycle ride which are mouth breathers and which are nose breathers, because the mouth breathers have got bugs in their teeth. It's far more sanitary to breathe through the nose, by far.
Is this good for somebody that doesn't have sinus but is a mouth breather, and the doctors say the adenoids, everything is fine, it's just a habit with him?
Definitely.
And the horseradish, you do that, lobelia, you think too?
Well,
The horseradish.
I'd use the horseradish.
Every
Absolutely.
day a little more, like a 1/3 teaspoon, the next time.
No,
half?
3 days. You should wait 3 days before you step up another third. So you get up to a teaspoon 3 times a day. Now, if you do have polyps in the nose and you can't breathe through there because they're swollen up, again we come back to white oak bark. You can either take the powder and take a flexible straw, put it up the nose, and blow a little powder up there. Not too much or it'll plug. A little powder on each side, and it'll start to act as an astringent, and it starts to shrink it down. And you can follow on through until you can clear this condition. If you can drink through the nose, some people find it easy to take oak bark tea and drink through the nose. I can't, but many people can. You can do it that way. Drink some also, and this is one of the great aids for a condition of this type. If a person has a condition in the nose because of sores, they can use black walnut tincture and either blow it up there or take a camel hair brush and paint in there, or an atomizer and blow it in. There are many ways that you can take care of it. All of your herbs here we think are great. Wild yam is one that you can grow in your own backyard. And when you have matured your wild yam, it will do you great good if you'll use it, because it's so much superior to sweet fennel seed or anything like that for breaking gas.
With your horseradish, do you then chew it, or do you have them, do you swallow it, or do you have
Oh yes, you swallow the horseradish. Yes, you swallow the remains. With wild yam, when you have horrible gas attacks. I remember a doctor called me from down in Arizona. He said he had a patient that he had used sweet fennel, he'd used antispasmodics, he'd used ginger, everything, and nothing would work. That person was screaming with pain from the gas. I said, get you some wild yam. And with the first drink of wild yam, it worked, and it burped right out. And it is a great help. Of course, this can be done through reflexology too. This may surprise some, but working on the foot, going up the ascending, over the transverse, descending, and sigmoid, you can work that gas out in many cases. I remember I had a patient, a woman, that she was having such horrible gas pains, and she would call me. That was before I was using wild yam. And she would call me to get relief. She'd sit there in such pain. And it's a peculiar thing, but as you work on the foot, you come up, you will get a certain result part way and another result the other way. As you work up the ascending colon and over on the transverse, burp, 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 burp. And as you work the ascending and down the descending colon, it burps out the other end. And she was so embarrassed she could died. But I said, that's all right, just don't worry about it. Let's get the gas out of there. And this was such a classic case. I've seen a number since, but it's interesting. It's these things that take the monotony out of life. Well, let's skip over now to some more herbs, if we may, please. The stimulating herbs. We have gone on to some of these as we did with the horseradish. But, you know, and we have talked quite a bit on the cayenne. There are so many things. In fact, we have a book coming off on cayenne, haven't we? Before too long. Okay. All right. It won't hurt to do a little bit of reading on that. But Jamaica ginger is another stimulant. And Jamaica ginger is an antispasmodic, but it is also a fine stimulant. But it has a characteristic that's a little different from some of the others. Your Jamaica ginger has the ability of being a lead sheep. That's a crude name, but that's about all I can call it. It'll take the rest of the herbs in the formula and take them to the specific area, which is the lower cavity. So for bowel or reproductive or various things of this type, your Jamaica ginger is excellent. I remember once, remember a lady called and she said, my daughter is screaming with pain. She has menstrual pains, and it was quite a distance away, and it was at night. And I said, well, give her some female corrective and some hormone estrogen. And she said, it's night and there's nowhere I can get it. Well, what herbs can I use? And so I started telling some of the herbs to use in a formula. And she said, we don't have any of that, we don't have any of that, we don't have any of that. And Jamaica ginger was one. She said, hey, we got some Jamaica ginger. Well, I said, and now this is a point to remember. If you don't have the 10 herbs or the 12 herbs or the 8 herbs that's in the formula, and you've got some of them, for heaven's sakes, use the ones you've got until you can get the rest of them. Because it may not do as good a job, but it'll do the job. And she said, well, we got the ginger. And I said, for heaven's sakes, use that. And I rolled over and went back to sleep. It wasn't an aspirin. It was ginger. You know, when they call you in the middle of the night, take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning. Well, I told her to take some Jamaica ginger. The next morning she called, and she said, we couldn't find any other herbs, but we found the Jamaica ginger. And you know, she said, she burped right up and went to bed and went to sleep. That's all it took, was the Jamaica ginger. It's excellent. Pepper. Here is one of the most misunderstood, the most maligned of herbs. People say, don't use black pepper. My mother used to complain when I would use black pepper. She and Papa could use it, but only a little bit. But I wasn't supposed to use any. And I wondered why. And I was told all the way through, well, black pepper is serious to use. Don't, because it's an irritant. It'll cause trouble in the liver and in the kidneys and in the bladder. And, well, folks, listen to this carefully. This is a truth, but it is a half-truth. And a half-truth is more vicious than a lie. So I didn't use pepper for years. I went to herbal school and I found out that pepper is one of the great foods. Number one, it's a stimulant. and one of the great stimulants. And it helps makes the other foods do their job, and the other herbs do their job. But number two, it is a digestive herb that is superior, and it'll help assist the digestion. But the full truth is, black pepper is a great food